In a record 70 years on the throne, the Queen has dealt with no fewer than 14 Prime Ministers, starting with Winston Churchill, right through to Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair and now Boris Johnson. One of the mainstays of the royal and political calendars is the weekly audience between monarch and Prime Minister, just one aspect of the Queen's work on affairs of state, as our Deputy Political Editor Vicky Young tells us.
The Queen and her Prime Ministers. This was a reunion organised in the 1990s. Head of State and Head of Government appear side by side for dozens of public events. But the relationship is forged behind closed doors. Weekly meetings at the Palace.
Very nice to see you again.
Lovely to see you again.
That we only get a glimpse of. The Queen's views are kept private. Political neutrality carefully adhered to. Her words written by her Prime Ministers.
I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your councils.
Her first was Winston Churchill. He was protective of this new young sovereign who had so much to learn.
Now upon the shoulders of Sir Anthony falls the role of the Queen's First Minister.
After Churchill came Anthony Eden, whose decision to send troops to Suez in 1956 brought national humiliation. In 1964, Harold Wilson became the Queen's first Labour Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, Your Majesty.
She does her homework. I hadn't done mine. I hadn't read a particular cabinet committee, which I didn't chair, and was leaving for the weekend. She knew I hadn't done my homework. She's very nice about it.
The Queen's constitutional right is to be kept informed of government policy. She offers encouragement and advice.
Every Prime Minister, I would guess, from talking with other Prime Ministers and from my own experience, has the greatest friendliness from the Queen.
On rare occasions, the Queen has very subtly aired her views, like this speech where Mr Callaghan's government was considering devolution.
I cannot forget that I was crowned Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Good evening, Your Majesty.
You've had a very long day.
When Margaret Thatcher became Britain's first female Prime Minister, there were reports that the Queen privately disapproved of the government's social agenda, but the Iron Lady played down suggestions of a serious rift.
Even if she did say it, all right, she may have felt something, but there was never any difficulty in saying anything to me. Any difficulty at all.
Every year, there's a royal invitation to Balmoral, matters of state discussed over a cup of tea.
In the years that I came to know her as Prime Minister, Prime Ministers had private meetings with the Queen each week. She invariably looks forward.
Tony Blair certainly appreciated the Queen's advice after his landslide victory for Labour.
Even though I was the politician, she was the monarch, I found her not just useful, but sometimes deeply insightful.
But anyway, it's very good to welcome you here. And
when you have to explain what you're trying to achieve, it's a very good form of therapy. And imagine doing that to the world's greatest public servant, who's seen it all and heard it all. There's really no better way of getting your head straight about what you're trying to do. 14
Prime Ministers, 14 very different politicians with their own visions, worries and agendas. For 7 decades, the Queen has worked with all of them, a monarch at the heart of a democratic constitution, advising, encouraging and warning, providing continuity as each new political tide swept in. Vicky Young, BBC News.
And that's it. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.